Good day. This is Red Hawk. I'm coming to you from the deep end with my cohorts, Marianne Rudis and Bob Hayes. And you know, today we're going to go somewhere that is ubiquitous, that is universal, and that all of us are caught up in. And you know what that is? The mistake. Evolution has this most powerful tool, the mistake. Now, mistake is defined as an action or judgment that is misguided or wrong. Life's evolution depends on things going wrong. We wouldn't have got here if it hadn't been the case. So how do we apply this understanding of the mistake as a powerful tool to our own personal lives? Because let's face it, mistakes on the personal level can really suck. Now, the key to making mistakes on a personal level has to do with what we do with them, what we do with our mistakes. Mistakes have been called the portal to discovery. They've been called, as one person said, the only real mistake is one from which you learn nothing. Another quote, mistakes are the stepping stones to wisdom. Every mistake is an opportunity. Mistakes do not define you. They educate, empower, and enable you to reach your true potential. Boy, that's really nice stuff. It's true. But the fact is, it's some real shit that we're trying to make something of. And what I've learned, and I'll come back to this, the shit, if you know what to do with it, it can make your garden grow. You can convert it into energy, but you gotta see what it is first. Now, in my life, my own mistakes, they became these pivot points, if you will, that my life turned on. Something happened, and I changed directions, if you will. As well, my own mistakes have caused me to eat a lot of crow. That's an idiom, if you will. And what I've learned about eating crow, that's owning your own shit, as it were, is that it's a lot worse cold than it is warm. So eat it quick. Get over it. Learn from your stuff quick. Own it and move on. So I learned this lesson over and over. When it comes to owning my own shit, do it early instead of late. Now, let's face it, everyone makes mistakes, except, of course, narcissists. They never make mistakes. But mistakes are universal. And there's a whole neuroscience that's emerging around making mistakes because they're seeing that it activates certain specific areas of the brain associated with learning and memory. There is a whole psychology of mistakes emerging, which I thought was kind of interesting, if you will. There's a whole article I read. It said it was called "Embracing Failure as a Path to Success." I like that. A lot of people see themselves as heroes in their story. Most people do, and I do too sometimes. But mostly, I see myself as a fool, and I seem to get a lot higher yield out of being a fool in my narrative than I do seeing myself as a hero in my narrative. Who was it said, show me a hero and I'll write you a tragedy? So what keeps us from learning from our mistakes? Now, in my study this week, over and over, one thing kept emerging: our existing beliefs. We all struggle to protect our egos, and our egos are built on this whole narrative of beliefs and understandings. And that sets up patterns and biases and all kinds of things. And it allows us to repeat our same mistakes over and over again. I can't remember who was it that said, learn from history or repeat it. And I think that's part of what the human family's journey has been, is how to, if you will, learn from our huge mistakes. And, the Civil War, that was trying to learn from our mistake, and we're still actually working on that one. So different kinds of mistakes have different kinds of responses. And there are some mistakes that, they can't be undone, if you will. It's difficult to learn from them. 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last year. And although I get what October 7th was to the Israelis, that seems a bit extreme. And I pray that we're all learning from that one, because it's really, really hard, I think, on the human family. But what we can say is a good mistake surely gets our attention. A good mistake is one that we can learn from. Learning, by way of our mistakes, by the way, is not the most comfortable way to learn. As a matter of fact, it kind of sucks. But it's extremely effective. I still remember things I got wrong on tests in college, and I don't have any idea what I got right on those tests, but I still remember what I got wrong. And as we learn, at least as I've learned, I've begun to see a pattern in my mistakes, which to me has led to me evoking almost an unconscious bias. A look at that up close, it's like, wow, I didn't know I had that in me. And what happens if we own our mistakes is we begin to see ways to respond to them, to create something good out of them. Now, I was as a child being brought up in the racist South, I have to say I had to overcome a shitload of bias. I had a lot of unlearning of the past and relearning into tomorrow, which I'm still doing. Once in a while, something in me, a thought, something will trigger it, and I'll see a racist piece of me, and it just makes me sick. And I almost go, ooh, this is me? Ay, ay, ay. How do I get rid of that? And I'm still working on this internal process of owning my own shit, if you will, and seeing that this shit can be made to make the garden grow, or to create energy, or I can wallow in it, I can deny it, I can, use air freshener and all kinds of stuff. But good mistakes can fuel new tomorrows. My own life is a narrative of connecting these dots of my mistakes and my shifting perspective into a more real and honest view of both the world and myself. So to put it bluntly, mistakes, they are integral and important to one's spiritual growth. And you can see how one grows spiritually by them owning their mistakes and being able to pull the Rumpelstiltskin circuit and take dross and weave it into gold. And I think that's what mistakes are doing. Mistakes are part and parcel of life. And if it doesn't kill you, you can do something good with it. And there are some mistakes that cause great suffering. Again, what's going on in Gaza and Lebanon and Syria, these are awful. But I will say this. If we can learn to embrace our mistakes more, if we can create a social narrative that allows us to do that with grace, I think that's a great boon to the human family. And so before I throw this in the laps of my cohorts, I want to say Martin Luther had a benediction that he used often, and I share it with you today. At the end of the worship, he would say, "Go and sin boldly." So, good bold sin, you can see them, they're right out loud. So I'm going to put this to Marianne Ruddis, who's in Spokane Valley. First, what say you with this mistake stuff? Are you for mistakes or against them?
Well, I think that I am neither for nor against, because I think mistakes are inevitable. They happen because of deficient knowledge, defective judgment, and carelessness, right? That's like a classic definition. And we never know everything. So we are, no matter how much we research something, we still have deficient knowledge. And we make our judgments based on the knowledge that we have. So if we make judgments out of emotions, raging emotions, that may be a little defective. But we also need to pay attention to that. And if we're not careful in what we do. So when we act or we do something, a mistake will provide us with knowledge. And so it will teach us something that we didn't know before. And I think if we can view them in that light, and it's not a matter of just saying, I'm sorry I did this, but if we need to use them to change our behavior, because now we know something we didn't know before. And so I think that then our judgments become better as well, because now we're gaining knowledge, and we can be careful almost to a paralyzing state as well. So there has to be some acceptable risk in the things that we do, and when we weigh out what it is we want to do, I think that we only make in hindsight, because if we get the desired outcome, it wasn't a mistake. If we get an outcome that we didn't desire, it was a mistake in our mind. And yet it's something that may turn out to be even better than the outcome that we had wanted, because of what we have learned from that. And now we can change our behavior and take that forward into our next decision. So that's kind of how I've come to start viewing this. I used to be pretty hard on myself and beat myself up quite a bit over mistakes, but I'm coming to see them now as something that is necessary for growth. So,
amen. Bob, what do you say in first response?
Well, I look back at my life, and there's so many mistakes that I can't even begin to list them. But most of them, I just kind of went on with living and moved forward. At the time, I didn't necessarily know they were mistakes. They were just events that occurred, and they led me on certain paths. Looking back, I can say, wow, that was a mistake. I wish I had taken a different path. But it's a mistake to dwell on those kind of regrets, because even though we make mistakes, we still have our life to live. We have our path to follow. And I think most of the mistakes I made were due to my own naivete. I'll give you an example. After I graduated, fresh, brand new PhD, I'm going out to conquer the world. And I got a job with the Army to do research. And in my naivete, I thought, I've got the greatest subject pool that any researcher could ever wish for. I can answer all of the great questions that psychologists and sociologists have been trying to find. I've got a captive pool of subjects. And my first experiment, I had my subjects lined up. We were training them on a diesel engine, and we were trying to see which was the best way to teach them to fix that diesel engine. And I had them all lined up, and they were waiting for their time to do the experiment. And a sergeant walked in and said, I need those men right now. And I said, wait a minute, those are my subjects. I'm in the middle of running an experiment. And he said, no, we've got a general coming to visit, and these men need to go and paint rocks. And at that point, I realized that I had no control over my subject pool. I had no control over whether or not I was going to be able to answer the great questions of history. But I just needed to move ahead and do what I could. So
I love it.
That mistake was due to my naivete, and I had to adjust my expectations radically for the rest of my career to try and do some good within the constraints that I found myself.
Amen.
So that was a big one.
And you both put your finger on a couple of things. Marianne, I think we need to delight in our imperfections. I think Brene Brown's writings have kind of shown that this is a growing edge. And, to me, mistakes are what human algorithm is about. We've talked about the human being. The next step of evolution really, in my mind, has to do with justice and making sure the whole human family is included in for the resources and everything else. And mistakes are an algorithmic process that says not this way. Go this way, or try another way. And it really does have to do with growing. I had a friend who worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab, and this was back in the 90s, and one of their probes was getting ready to go through the rings of Saturn. And I said, boy, I bet you hope all your predictions are completely right. And he went, oh gosh, just the opposite. We're hoping things are not like we see, because when we see stuff that does not fit our model, we have to change the model, and it grows to a fuller point of view of what's really going on. And I think that's, one of the reasons I want to bring this mistake issue out here at the deep end is for us to embrace it. And that does, in experiments, we make mistakes on purpose, or as Edison would have said, I don't have 1,000 failures. I've just learned 1,000 ways that it doesn't work. And we're still trying to figure out how this human existence works, how it works in a global system now, much less at a local level of governing, which we're still working on. And when I think of the full round of mistakes that the human family is making, that, Bob, you said your life there's so many of them. Well, yeah, that's the way it works. That's how we're shaped. That's how we find to not go this way. And I made a big mistake one time. I borrowed Louie's car because I was gonna go to the store and get a pop or something, but I had just dropped 3 hits of LSD. And it was raining out, and I was on my way to the store, and I stopped, and I realized I had just run 3 stop signs, and I didn't even know. I crawled back home. Believe me, I never got in a car to drive that messed up again. And I have friends that got into a car that messed up, and that was their last mistake because they're dead. So I don't want to poo-poo mistakes and say that, oh boy, we're making mistakes, because some of them can kill you. The ones that didn't kill me, and I recognize I didn't kill me, I call grace. So mistakes have this two-faced piece that it faces us. One, they really suck. I mean, owning my own stuff, and I, as a pastor, I've made a lot of mistakes. As I said one Sunday in church, look, if I haven't offended you yet, just give me time. I'm an equal opportunity offender, and I'm just up here throwing shoes, and if one fits you, you put it on. But I want to lift up, I guess, the season within ourselves where we can delight in our imperfection, because mistakes are inevitable, and I think there's a point where you can get neurotically hung up and just waiting for the next shoe to fall, sort of thing, which is not healthy. But what is healthy is making a good, honest mistake and learning and growing from it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I would like to distinguish between personal mistakes and scientific mistakes, because I like to think of myself as a scientist, and the scientific method is based upon mistakes. In fact, the whole idea of testing a hypothesis is you want it to fail. That's the way it works. You don't want to prove the hypothesis is correct. You want to prove the hypothesis is incorrect. And that's the way things are set up in science. And but it's a different story on the personal side, because the personal side has so many implications for your self-image and for your career and for your personal interactions with people and so forth. So you got to be a lot more careful with those kind of mistakes, because sometimes they can not only affect you, but the people that you love and the people that you depend upon.
Yeah.
So it's a very fuzzy area, the whole idea of mistakes.
And, what you're talking about is consequences. It's not just how we respond, but those are mistakes can have far-reaching consequences that suck at a whole different order of sucking.
Yeah, because you were talking about driving while impaired, and that mistake may end your life, but it can also ripple out and end a lot of other lives. And
Right.
when you make huge mistakes like that, and out of carelessness and poor judgment, and you're not just
Stupidity.
affecting yourself,
Sorry.
stupidity, you're affecting everyone. So, and I think that the more that we develop our self, we become better. We have better knowledge. We increase our judgment. You were talking earlier about bias. Once you start to recognize your own bias, and you can make better judgments, and you can be more careful. But mistakes can cause a lot of pain. They can be very painful, not just for you, and you were mentioning the wars. We're seeing it globally, right? They can hurt a lot of people. And so how do we take our own personal mistakes and turn that into something where we can be better people in the world, so that we can spread that? So that's...
Well, and I think mistake management is integral to spiritual growth. That we can't grow without owning this part of ourselves and seeing it as a point of growth, a point where what is wrong or definitely misguided can shift our perspective into a little bit closer to what is right and what is good.
Yeah.
And we have to own our mistakes to be able to do that.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
I think...
Well, again, I think that the real key is how we react to our mistakes. Because as we've all said already, mistakes are inevitable. So when you say manage mistakes, you can't manage what mistakes are going to come your way or what you're going to encounter. But how you react to those mistakes, how you can turn them into learning events, how you can turn them into ways in which to not only help yourself, but to help others who may be in similar situations. That's a different story, and that's really what we're managing. We're managing our reactions, not necessarily what mistakes we're going to encounter.
Yeah.
And our delivery of pointing out other people's mistakes to them, right?
Yeah, you got to be real careful, because you can make a mistake in how you approach someone to tell them they made a mistake.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
And I ask our listeners to look up, just Google how to make good from your mistakes. It's really an interesting journey, and we could have gone that way. And there's a whole process, or actually depends on what psychology you go. There's a number of processes to help you process your own mistakes to make something greater of yourself from them. And we're doing that all the time. That's the biggest problem with narcissism. It's unable to learn from their own mistakes, and thus they come across as less wise than someone with just, that we would say, has common sense. It's like an ingrown hair or an ingrown toenail. It's an ingrown ego development that doesn't allow itself to grow out, and it becomes an aberration. And we see that all the time. We're seeing it, in the Republican Party all over the place, which breaks my heart because I love the Republican Party. When John McCain died, something died with him. So I think part of my motivation for wanting to talk about the mistakes is because, and Bob, you said this in your opening statement, my life is a string of mistakes. And yet, those who don't make mistakes seem to be less wise than those who do. And maybe, that's why scientists sometimes appear wise, because they're at least applying the scientific method to their own life at some level. And I think that that's really, really important. And the whole concept of the mistake as evolution's greatest tool, I want our listeners to hear and see that in their life it is also your greatest tool to growth, to wisdom, to one of the opening quotes I used was a portal to a greater understanding of not just the world, but of yourself. Being a human is a bumbling event in my mind. When I've owned my bumblingness and I've learned to laugh at myself, a grace entered my life that allows me to laugh more because I'm paying more attention to it and I'm being honest. And I beat myself up less, and I grow more. Again, it's our bin of mistakes is the compost of our growth. And that's something that's pretty cool to participate in, up close and far away. And having said that, we're coming to the end of our time. Bob, final comments?
Well, again, I'll get back to what I said earlier, how we react to our mistakes. We can deny that we made a mistake. We can blame someone else for it. We can ignore any kind of change that is necessary in ourselves. Or we can realistically look at what happened, look at why we made the mistake, look at how we could avoid the mistake in the future, and look at how we can grow from it. So it's those two divergent paths that we have to make choices every day in our lives, how we react to our world, the events that we encounter. And if we take the path toward learning, toward acceptance, toward accepting that we are fallible creatures and that we got to move forward from that, then I think we're on the right track.
Amen. Marianne, final comments?
Yeah, I think mistakes happen in hindsight, and I don't think any of us sets out to make a mistake unless you're doing an experiment and you're throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. But for the most part, I think that, we all do it. But there can also be this fear of acting because you're afraid of making mistakes. And I've seen that, I deal in the bereavement world, and I see that where people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing to someone that they say nothing. And so I think if we can embrace the fact that and accept that we all make mistakes, and it's like, I think you said it, Bob, it's what we do with that afterwards that makes the difference. And so, let's go out there and live our lives, because you can paralyze yourself if you're afraid to make mistakes.
Amen. Well, we're back to Martin Luther's go and sin boldly. I have to say I have a response in my head, and it's the Three Stooges theme song. And when I make a mistake, that's the first thing that I have firing off now that lightens it And I feel like Mo, Curly, and Larry in my head. And I think that's helpful. I really do. I think that's helpful. And Marianne, you used a word, and that's fear. You know, fear is, boy, talk about a twin-bladed concept. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for fear. And we're almost wiping ourselves out because of fear. It's an amazing thing. So we're going to go to fear for our next podcast. It'll be our 4th podcast on fear. It's one of those recurring themes, those recurring aspects of those things and processes that life can't do without. And yet, what was it Freud said? Civilization created neurosis, which is basically afraid of stuff that doesn't even exist. Stuff that's chasing its own butt in our heads, if you will. Fear. Fear is an amazing thing. I think that the Funkadelics said it beautifully. Fear is a mind killer. And we can do something with it. We're going to go and we're going to explore this, and we're going to try to both free ourselves from fear and put it in its place that it might serve us well. Until then, my friends, may the blessings of the universe be on you. Peace.